As Adoma stepped into the classroom, a hush fell over the room. Her classmates, who once admired her, now stared with cold eyes filled with disgust. Whispers filled the air, growing louder, until one voice finally broke the silence. "Well, well," Ya said with a sly smile, "look who's back. Our little teacher's favorite." Adoma froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The words felt like a slap. She had heard the rumors, but this was worse than she imagined. She hadn't done anything wrong, or had she? The whispers grew, and as she stood there, alone, she knew her life was about to change in ways she couldn't control. Months earlier, Adoma was known as the smartest girl in the whole school. She lived in the quiet village of Kabina, where her days were simple but full of promise. Every morning, she dressed in her neat school uniform and walked to Ashanti Academy with her head held high. She was proud of her hard work and the respect it earned her. At school, everyone knew Adoma. Her teachers praised her for being the top student, and her friends admired her for being both kind and smart. Even the other girls who secretly envied her had to admit that she worked harder than anyone else. But, deep down, Adoma sometimes felt tired. While her classmates went out to play or stayed up late chatting, she stayed at her desk, poring over her books. She barely slept, always worried that if she didn't study hard enough, someone else might take her place at the top. One evening, after a long day at school, Adoma sat alone in the classroom, reviewing her notes. As the light outside faded into dusk, she heard the door creak open. Turning around, she saw her classmate Ya standing there with a strange smile on her face. Ya walked into the room, her eyes scanning the pile of books on Adoma's desk. "You're always studying," she said, shaking her head. "But let me ask you something, Adoma, don't you ever get tired of trying so hard?" Adoma looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" Ya stepped closer, her voice lowering to a whisper. "You're beautiful, Adoma. Everyone knows it. The teachers, especially Mr. Badu, they can't take their eyes off you. You could get whatever you want without working so hard." Adoma stared at Ya, confused. "What are you saying?" Ya grinned. "I'm saying, if I were you, I wouldn't be wasting time with all these books. You could use your looks and charm to get ahead, you know. The teachers already adore you." Adoma felt her stomach twist. She had never thought about her beauty in that way. To her, it didn't matter, her success was based on hard work, not how she looked. But Ya's words stayed with her. That night, Adoma lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Ya's suggestion played over and over in her mind. Could it be true? She had noticed the way some teachers smiled at her or seemed extra kind. Maybe it wasn't just her grades they admired. The next morning, Adoma stood in front of the mirror, studying her reflection. She had always been told she was pretty, her smooth skin, her bright eyes, her long braids. But until now, it had never seemed important. She sighed and pushed the thought aside, getting ready for school as usual. At school, things felt different. As she walked down the hall, she caught more glances than usual. Was she imagining it, or were her classmates whispering more than before? Even her teachers seemed to pay extra attention when she spoke. By the end of the day, Adoma couldn't shake the feeling that Ya might be right. Maybe she didn't need to work so hard after all. The next few days passed like a blur. Adoma went through the motions, answering questions in class, taking notes, and studying after school. But her mind wasn't focused. She kept thinking about Ya's words. Wouldn't it be easier to just use her looks? Finally, after much hesitation, Adoma decided to test Ya's theory. It felt strange, almost like she was betraying herself, but the temptation was too great. One morning, she arrived at school wearing a little more makeup than usual and let her braids down from their usual tight style. The reaction was immediate. People stared as she walked through the courtyard, whispering to one another. Even her teachers seemed flustered. Mr. Bodu, her math teacher, nearly dropped his chalk when she entered the classroom. During class, Mr. Bodu handed out a surprise quiz. Normally, Adoma would have been prepared, but this time, she hadn't studied. Panic gripped her as she stared at the paper. She wasn't ready. She couldn't fail. Then she remembered Ya's words. When Mr. Bodu walked by to collect the quizzes, Adoma looked up at him and smiled sweetly. "I hope I did well, sir," she said softly. Mr. Bodu smiled back, his cheeks turning slightly red. "You always do well, Adoma," he stammered, taking her paper and walking away. The next day, when the quizzes were returned, Adoma's heart raced. When she saw her score, 100%, perfect, her stomach dropped. She knew she hadn't done that well. Days passed, and Adoma found herself slipping further into this new role. She studied less, but her grades remained high. Her smiles and kind words seemed to have more power than the hours she used to spend poring over her books. It was like magic. But not everyone was happy with the change. Adoma noticed her classmates whispering behind her back. Ya's grins seemed sharper, more smug. It wasn't long before Adoma overheard the rumors. "She's only getting good grades because the teachers like her," one girl whispered. "She doesn't even study anymore," another added. Adoma tried to ignore it. After all, her grades were still good. What did it matter what people said? One afternoon, after class had ended, Adoma stayed behind to collect her things. The classroom was empty, except for two teachers who didn't realize she was still there. She froze when she heard them talking. "I don't know what's happened to Adoma," one of them said. "She's not the same hardworking student she used to be." "Tell me about it," the other replied. "I've seen the way she acts. The way she uses her looks to charm the teachers. It's not right." Adoma's heart sank. She had always prided herself on her hard work. Now, even the teachers were talking about her behind her back. Was this what she had become? As Adoma hurried out of the classroom, her mind raced. What had she done? She had thought using her beauty would make things easier, but now she was trapped in a web of lies and rumors. When she got home that evening, her parents noticed something was wrong. "What's the matter, Adoma?" her mother asked. Adoma forced a smile. "Nothing, Mama," she said, but inside, she felt like her world was falling apart. She couldn't stop thinking about what the teachers had said. She had lost herself in the process. It wasn't just about her grades anymore, she had let her pride, and Ya's twisted advice, ruin her reputation. The next day, Adoma arrived at school with a plan. She would go back to being the hardworking student she used to be. No more makeup, no more tricks. She would prove to everyone that she was more than just a pretty face. But when she walked through the school gates, something was wrong. The students were gathered in groups, whispering and pointing at her. Adoma's stomach churned as she made her way to the classroom. As soon as she entered, the room fell silent. Every pair of eyes was on her, filled with judgment and pity. Ya stood up, her arms crossed, with a cruel smile on her face. "Oh, look who it is," Ya said loudly. "The girl who sleeps her way to good grades." Adoma's heart raced. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice shaking. Ya's smile widened. Come on, Adoma. Everyone knows what you've been doing. Using your looks to get ahead. It's pathetic. The room erupted into laughter, and Adoma felt her face burn with shame. That's not true, she cried out. But no one was listening. Her classmates had already made up their minds. The rumors had spread like wildfire, and now, no matter what she said, no one would believe her. Later that day, Adoma was called to the principal's office. The principal, Mrs. Timmer, sat behind her desk, her expression stern. Adoma, we've received some troubling reports about your behavior, she began. Adoma's heart pounded in her chest. But it's not true, she said. I never did any of the things they're saying. Mrs. Timmer shook her head. I don't know what to believe, Adoma. But the damage has been done. Parents are threatening to pull their children out of school. We have no choice but to expel you. Adoma felt like the ground had been pulled out from under her. Expelled. Her perfect record, her dreams of the future, everything was gone in an instant. Adoma stood frozen, her body numb. Expelled, she whispered, barely able to speak. Her mind couldn't wrap around the word. This couldn't be happening. She had worked so hard for so long, and now it was all slipping away. Mrs. Timmer sighed, her eyes softening slightly. I'm sorry, Adoma. I don't know how things got to this point, but the school's reputation is at stake. The board has made its decision. Adoma wanted to scream, to beg, but she knew it wouldn't make a difference. She had fallen into a trap, and there was no escaping the consequences now. With a shaky breath, she turned and walked out of the office, her world in pieces. As Adoma stepped out into the hallway, everything felt like a blur. She could feel the eyes of students and teachers on her, whispering as she passed. The laughter from earlier echoed in her ears, and her legs felt like they were made of stone. When she reached the gate of the school, she stopped and looked back one last time at Ashanti Academy. This place had been her second home, where she had once felt invincible. But now, it was just a reminder of how far she had fallen. She walked home slowly, the weight of her expulsion pressing down on her shoulders like a heavy burden. Her parents would be devastated. How could she explain this to them? They had always been so proud of her, so sure that their daughter would succeed. Now, she was nothing but a failure. When Adoma arrived home, her mother was waiting for her at the door. Adoma, you're home early, she said, smiling warmly. Is everything okay? Adoma felt her heart break a little more. She didn't deserve that warmth, that love. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Tears welled up in her eyes, and her mother's smile faded. Adoma, what happened? Her mother asked, stepping closer. I've been expelled, Adoma whispered, her voice barely audible. Her mother's eyes widened in shock, and she called for Adoma's father. Later that evening, Adoma sat with her parents in the living room. Her father paced the floor, his hands behind his back, while her mother sat beside her, rubbing her shoulder gently. They had already heard the whole story about the rumors, the accusations, and how everything had spiraled out of control. How could this happen, Adoma? Her father asked, his voice filled with both anger and confusion. We trusted you. We believed in you. And now this. I didn't do any of the things they're saying, Adoma said, her voice trembling. I never used my looks to get favors. I made a mistake. Her father stopped pacing and turned to face her. This mistake has cost you everything, Adoma. How are we supposed to fix this? Her mother's voice was softer, but no less disappointed. We need to find a new school for you, she said, her eyes filled with worry. You can't let this ruin your future. Adoma nodded, but deep down, she wondered if her future had already been ruined beyond repair. Days passed in a haze. Adoma barely left her room, ashamed to face the world. The few friends she had at Ashanti Academy hadn't reached out to her since the incident. It was as if she had been erased from their lives. Yeah, the girl who had started it all was likely still at school, smiling and laughing as if nothing had happened. But one morning, Adoma's mother walked into her room with surprising news. "Adoma, we found a new school for you," she said gently. "It's not as fancy as Ashanti, but it will give you a fresh start." Adoma felt a glimmer of hope, though it was faint. A fresh start sounded good, but what if it turned out the same way? What if the whispers followed her? What if the rumors never died? A week later, Adoma stood in front of her new school, Ikoma High. It was a simple, public school, much different from the prestigious Ashanti Academy. The building was smaller, the uniforms were plainer, and the students didn't seem to have the same air of competition and wealth. She took a deep breath, trying to gather her courage. This was her chance to rebuild her life, but the scars of her past weighed heavily on her heart. As she walked through the gates, she noticed a few students glance at her, but no one seemed particularly interested. There were no whispers, no cruel smiles. For now, at least, she was just another new student. The first day at Ikoma High was different. The teachers were kind but not overly impressed by her, and the students mostly kept to themselves. Adoma sat quietly in her classes, focusing on the lessons, determined to return to the hardworking girl she once was. But deep down, a part of her was still broken, unsure if she could ever truly regain the confidence she had lost. At lunchtime, she found a quiet corner in the courtyard to sit alone. As she picked at her food, a boy with a friendly smile approached her. "Hey," he said, sitting down across from her. "You're new here, right?" "I'm Kojo." Adoma nodded, offering a small smile. "Yes, I just transferred." Kojo didn't seem to notice her hesitance. "It's always tough starting at a new school, but don't worry. You'll fit in here. Everyone's pretty chill." Adoma wanted to believe him, but after what had happened at her last school, she wasn't sure if she could trust anyone anymore. As the days went by, Adoma kept her head down and worked hard, trying to blend in with the other students. She didn't try to stand out or impress anyone. She just wanted to get through each day without drawing attention to herself. But despite her efforts, whispers began to creep into the hallways again. A few students started to recognize her from her old school. "Isn't that the girl who got expelled?" they whispered. "Didn't she use her looks to cheat?" Adoma's heart sank. The rumors had followed her, just as she feared. No matter how hard she tried to leave her past behind, it always seemed to find her. One afternoon, as Adoma was leaving school, she spotted a group of girls standing near the gate, whispering and pointing at her. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she hurried her pace, desperate to escape their judgmental stares. But as she passed by them, one of the girls stepped forward. "Hey, Adoma," the girl called, her voice sharp. Adoma froze, her stomach twisting in knots. She turned slowly, bracing herself for the worst. "You think we don't know who you are?" the girl sneered. "You're the girl who used her pretty face to get what she wanted, right? Thought you could just start over here and no one would notice." Adoma's blood ran cold. The rumors were spreading again. Adoma's heart pounded as the words echoed in her ears. The girl's sneer twisted into a cruel smile, and the group behind her laughed, fueling the flames of Adoma's growing panic. She had hoped that Ikoma High would be her fresh start, but the past seemed to cling to her like a shadow she couldn't escape. I didn't, Adoma began, her voice weak. Save it, the girl interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. We've all heard the story. Don't pretend to be innocent now. The laughter grew louder, and Adoma's cheeks burned with shame. Her feet felt rooted to the ground, her body frozen in place as the weight of their judgment pressed down on her. She wanted to scream, to tell them they didn't know the truth, but no words came out. Suddenly, a voice broke through the tension. Hey, leave her alone. Adoma turned to see Kojo approaching, his expression serious. He stood between her and the group, his arms crossed. The girls paused, their laughter dying down as they glanced at each other, unsure of how to respond. This isn't any of your business, Kojo, the lead girl snapped, her bravado wavering. It is now, Kojo replied calmly. If you don't know her story, don't spread rumors. Adoma's just trying to move on. Let her be. The girls mumbled something under their breath but eventually walked away, throwing one last glare in Adoma's direction. As they disappeared around the corner, Kojo turned to Adoma, his expression softening. You okay? He asked. Adoma swallowed hard, still feeling the sting of their words. I thought I could escape it, she whispered, her voice shaky. But no matter where I go, it follows me. Kojo shrugged. People will always talk, Adoma. It's up to you whether you listen to them or not. That night, as Adoma lay in bed, Kojo's words echoed in her mind. Could it really be that simple? She had spent so much time running from the rumors, trying to rebuild her life without ever facing the real issue. But maybe, just maybe, she didn't need to run anymore. The next day, Adoma made a decision. She couldn't control what people said about her, but she could control how she responded. She was tired of hiding, tired of letting her past dictate her future. It was time to face the whispers head-on. When she arrived at school, the usual mamas followed her through the hallways. But instead of lowering her head, Adoma stood tall. She met their stares with confidence, refusing to shrink under their judgment. If they wanted to talk, let them. She wouldn't be defined by the mistakes of her past. Weeks passed, and though the rumors still lingered, Adoma didn't let them break her. She threw herself back into her studies, reclaiming the hardworking girl she used to be. Slowly, the whispers began to fade, replaced by something else, respect. Her teachers noticed the change in her. Adoma wasn't the shy, nervous girl she had been when she first arrived at Ikoma High. She was determined, focused, and even a little bit fearless. The top grades she had once earned through charm and manipulation now came through effort and dedication. Kojo remained by her side, offering quiet support whenever she needed it. His friendship became a source of strength for Adoma, a reminder that not everyone saw her through the lens of gossip. With him, she could be herself, flawed, but determined to rise above it all. One afternoon, as Adoma sat under a tree in the schoolyard, Kojo joined her, handing her a book. You left this in class, he said with a grin. Thanks, Adoma replied, smiling back. She felt lighter these days, freer than she had in a long time. You've come a long way, you know, Kojo said, his tone thoughtful. Adoma glanced at him, her smile fading slightly. I still feel like people see me as that girl from Ashanti Academy. The one who... You're not that girl anymore, Kojo interrupted gently. You've changed. And anyone who can't see that isn't worth your time. Adoma nodded, grateful for his words. He was right. She had made mistakes, but she had learned from them. And that was what mattered. Months later, as Adoma prepared for the final exams at Ikoma High, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. The past no longer haunted her the way it once had. She had faced her demons, and though the journey had been painful, it had also made her stronger. The morning of the exam, Adoma stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. Her braids were neatly tied back, her face free of makeup, and her eyes were clear and focused. She had come full circle, returning to the girl she had been before the whispers and rumors, but wiser now. Stronger. She had learned that beauty could be a gift, but it could also be a trap. In the end, it was her character, her resilience, and her hard work that mattered most. She wasn't defined by her looks, or by what others said about her. She was defined by the choices she made, and today, she chose to be better. After the exams were over, Adoma sat in the courtyard, the weight of the year finally lifting from her shoulders. She had given it her all, and no matter the outcome, she knew she had earned it honestly. There was a deep sense of satisfaction in that. As the students began to leave, Kojo appeared once again by her side. "How'd it go?" he asked, sitting down beside her. Adoma smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. "I think I did well," she replied, her voice steady. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." Kojo grinned. "Good. You deserve it, Adoma." For the first time in what felt like forever, Adoma believed it. She had fought her way through the storm, and now, as she looked ahead to the future, she felt a sense of hope that had once seemed impossible. Her journey wasn't over, but she had learned one of life's most valuable lessons: no matter how far you fall, you can always choose to rise again. And rise, she would. With her heart full of hope and her spirit unbroken, Adoma was ready to face whatever challenges came her way. This was not the end of her story, it was only the beginning.